Welcome to Memorable Marketing by MediaGroup. This is episode 27. Today we're interviewing CMO Lynne Capozzi from Acquia. And Acquia is a company that deals with software. More about that later on. What's important in this episode is she talks about, as a CMO, how you educate your CEO. Talk about the friction between the sales company and the marketing company. And finally, we talk about the culture within the company and how to run certain campaigns. Stay tuned. It's a great episode.
Here, the marketing team focused on one thing, and then the sales team is out there saying something else.
Lynne, thank you so for being here.
Hi, Thomas. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's so good. Thank you. So let's talk about what you did before you joined Acquia.
Sure. So I've had many roles as a CMO in mostly enterprise type software companies. And so previous to Acquia, I was at a company called Systenet. Was CMO there, was a CMO at an enterprise mashup company called Jack B. And I spent many years at IBM. I ran a product division in marketing and sales within a product division within IBM, and started my career in a small software company called Lotus. So, and there you go.
And you always wanted to be in marketing?
I always wanted, I've been in both marketing and sales roles, but marketing is where my home is, where my heart is. And so, yes, this is where I have spent the majority of my career. I'd say in the past 15 years or so. It's a role that I like a lot, and we're definitely where my heart is.
Yeah, that sounds good. Can you tell us about Acquia and what it is you do and what's your business model?
So Acquia is the digital experience company. So we help companies be successful with their web properties. And that's everything from helping them to run their sites. Our product is based on the open source content management system called Drupal. And so we help people develop their sites and run their sites, as well as we provide software for marketers to help them do other things like a customer data platform and marketing automation system. So we're really trying to help people be successful with their web properties. And our customers are everything from the Australia Open, by the way, to lots of different size organizations and companies. So we run some of the largest websites in the world for Nestle, for Pfizer, for Johnson & Johnson, to many, many nonprofits and government organizations as well.
So when you say you run it, is it you build it, or you have the infrastructure to build it, or what is your...
Yeah, we provide the software. We provide the software and the tools to help run the websites. And then we have you asked about a business model. We have a community of really talented, wonderful partners, a partner community, which typically a customer will go to, and they will actually do the building of the sites.
So Drupal, is that your software?
Drupal is an open source product, and it is, and again, the founder of our company is the founder of Drupal. So we help provide things like security and compliance, and there are so many different modules that are available, or software packages that work with module, like templates that work with Drupal. And so we basically help provide enterprises with a nice starting point for Drupal, and then we help host their sites and provide them support.
So as a CMO of Acquia, your role is to, of course, build awareness around Acquia. How do you do that? What's your go-to strategy? What are your marketing plan, if I may ask?
Yeah, so we have marketing activity that happens all around the world. We specifically look at, obviously, our biggest tool, since we are the website company. Our biggest tool for us for marketing is our website. And so we spend a lot of time and energy and effort around making sure that our website is informative and helps people learn about what we provide and what products we provide, and what benefit we're providing to other customers on our website. So a lot of our marketing activity is obviously through the site. And then we have regional offices in many places around the world. And there we provide local support. So we'll do marketing events where people can come and learn a lot more about Acquia. And then we do a lot of work with our partners, as I said. So our partner community is about a third of our business goes through partners. And so we do a lot of work making sure that those partners are enabled on our products and making sure that they're educated about our products, and working with them closely for their particular expertise.
Is it okay if I ask a little more about the partners and how, so they go out and they pay a fee to you and then they get a fee from the clients? Can I ask about that?
Well, a lot of times they'll work directly with the customers. And so they will have a direct agreement with the customer themselves. And then the customer has a contract with us to deal with our products and hosting.
Tell me about Acquia as a brand. what is it? I mean, you said the founder, obviously, from your company is also the founder of Drupal, so there's a huge connection there. But what makes you more special? Because if it's open source, other companies can do what you do.
Yeah, we have been in business for about 13 years now, and what our sweet spot is we help enterprise companies be successful with Drupal. So we provide everything that they need. We provide the hosting, the support, various templates. We provide this additional security around it. So additional tools that work with Drupal. So people will come to us because we have a curated experience that we know works for an enterprise and for a company, an organization.
Let's talk about marketing. So if we go back to that. So you mentioned Australian Open, for instance, as a website that you've done Nestle and stuff like that. How do you, in order to get an enterprise client in, I mean, obviously there's a lot of choices out there. There's WordPress, there's Squarespace, there's many other tools you can use. How do you set yourself apart? And from a marketing perspective, how do you go out and carve a niche for yourself in a crowded market like this?
Yeah, that's a good question, Thomas. We're the only actually people that are open. And so we love to kind of talk about our openness. That means everything from open source, right? Which means that you get the backing of 1.4 million people who are using this Drupal product. And there's knowledge everywhere, all around the world. And so the fact that we're Drupal based is actually an advantage for us because it's so well known and there are so many people using it. And you could hire those developers off the street pretty easily, in terms of Drupal. So that I think is one advantage for us. The other is our tools are open. So we have a variety of different products that work with Drupal. And we like to say that they're open because you don't get locked in, you don't get siloed from one particular vendor. You can swap applications back and forth, you can share data, there's similar interfaces. So, it's the whole idea about being open is not just open source, but it's open in terms of communication between the products, which we think is one of our advantages.
Can you give me an example of a marketing campaign that you did that you were involved with Acquia that was really, really good?
Thomas, all my campaigns are really, really good.
Obviously, everyone is spectacular, but can you mention one that you're really particularly proud of?
Sure. Let me think for it. Well, there's two that come to mind. One is whenever I write, whenever I can put together content to support CMOs, it actually performs well. For instance, the CMO guide to redoing your website, the CMO guide to a customer data platform and what you need to know. Anytime I have that kind of a campaign, I have several of them right now in market, those campaigns do really well. And I think it's because I'm making that direct connection to a CMO. And so they know that it's for them. It's what all the information that they need to know about this particular topic. And so the CMO guide to fill in the blank for me in terms of my technology tends to work really well. And those campaigns are, it's very targeted, of course, because it's going to a CMO or maybe one level down. But those are extremely successful for us. And anytime I do a campaign that references our position in a Gartner Magic Quadrant, those fly off the shelf. Like those campaigns just do really, really well. Super. So that's kind of campaign oriented. The other very successful thing that we do once a year is we have our customer conference called Acquia Engage, and it is just amazing because it's like my Christmas. It's the best time of the year, and it really is just, I'm so proud of kind of the way we perform it and the team. The customers and partners come and they love it, and it is I think this year will be our 8th, I believe. And every year it's just really, we up the ante, if you will. It gets better and better every year. And people love coming back to it. And this year we get to do it in person again, which is quite nice.
I was about to ask about that because obviously because of the pandemic, you must have been shut down like everyone else.
Yeah, we did it virtually for a few years. So I'm happy to say we're going to do some globally around the world in person. Yeah.
Okay, so we can go back to the spectacular campaigns. I mean, so let's say you're going after the CMO. So you're using LinkedIn, or what kind of platform are you using to target the CMOs?
So we do, let's see, we do a little bit of everything, multi-channel, right? So we definitely use LinkedIn. Our website is big for us in terms of that. So we do a lot of inbound activity, and then I do intent data. So I do account-based marketing. I use intent data from a product we use called 6 Sense. I match that to some very targeted campaigns that we do, through ABM, as I mentioned, and we have a lot going on around just kind of driving people to our site through things like searches, So we do a lot around paid search and organic search, all those methods, right? All those methods.
So all of those things is combined, is driving them. So if I can go back and just dig a little deep down, you said inbound marketing. So is that based upon the SEO? They come in, they come through a funnel, they sign up, they get some newsletters, they get a free report. Is that what we're talking about from terms of?
Yes, yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah, exactly. So it's basically, I think of it as anyone that's out there looking for information about a topic or a product that we have, or maybe it's a little bit more generic, customer data platform in general, right? And so that's what we do. We make sure that we're very visible to anyone doing research on a topic that has to do with what we offer.
Let's go. Let's talk about your role as a CMO. Like, what's 3 things you wish someone had told you that you had to find out by yourself by being a CMO? To those people listening out there,
3 things I would say: teach your CEO about marketing.
Yes,
it's something that's pretty critical and something that I've learned over time. I've worked with many CEOs. I've worked with, previous to this one, I worked with the same CEO for 3 times. And I think the more you teach your CEO about marketing, the better. And I think the more educated they are. So I'd say that's definitely one thing I'd kind of offer for advice. I'd also say that, know that pivoting is a way of life, right? And so be ready to change, be ready to learn, be willing to make the switches, pull the levers as you need to, but you have to be willing and able to pivot quickly these days, I think is probably a big one. Don't live without the data. Have your data, make data-based decisions. And that's even more important than ever. So I'd say don't do it without the data.
Okay, good, because this is really good, because that's what I want to talk about. So the data is, of course, important, but also you were talking about pivoting before. But how do you know when to pivot? Because is it a gut check or is it a data check? I mean, when do you realize, okay, this is the end of the runway, or is it about to take off? Because sometimes the data is only a snapshot of what's happening, right? There's also other factors in play. How do you make that judgment call?
I would think it depends, right? So I think sometimes it is definitely a 100% data-driven decision, because you figure out that, oh, wait a minute, what I'm spending too much money here. I'm not getting enough return around it, right? So that's 100% data-driven. You're not making money on it. Don't do it. Pull it back. Stop it. Pivot. I think sometimes it's conditions and market-driven, right? COVID is a big example, right? Switching to everything virtual, out of your hands, but that's not. It's just like that's the way it is. That's a decision, something that was forced upon us, right? As we say. So I'd say that. The other thing is you got to. Sometimes you do have to plan ahead and think ahead about where you want to be. And so if you're saying, 1 year from now or 3 years from now, we want to be the biggest, digital experience company out there, digital experience platform company, then in order to get there in 3 years, I need to take these other steps in between to get there. And if you're, so you need to do your planning is what I'm saying. So a couple of years out, where do you want to be? Start planting those seeds now and doing the activity that's going to help you get there.
Okay, that's really good. And that's long-term thinking. But from a data point of view, it might take a while until the data supports that goal that you have, because if it's SEO, if it's a new organic search, it's a new inbound marketing activity, it can take some time. So I love you say you have to educate the CEO because of the patience of the CEO, because we, as a marketer people, we are so judged by the numbers every quarter, every month. We have to hit these targets. And so how do you justify having an idea that we are planning for the future 3 years down the line? I mean, how does your CEO take that kind of idea?
I think it's all in the whole plan, right? So my marketing plan matches to the business. And so we have a business plan for the company, and then I have my marketing plan of activity that's going to help us get there. So anytime I can show what I have in my plan, how it ties to the overall company objectives, then that's a no-brainer. Then he can totally understand that and agree with that, because it's how we're meeting that business objective. And we have something called the Vital Few, what we call Vital Few Objectives, or VFOs, we call them, and not UFOs, VFOs. And they help shape us. They help drive kind of where's the company going and what are we aiming for. And if if there's something in my marketing plan that doesn't match up to a VFO, then there's something wrong.
What's more important to you, the story or the numbers?
Got to go 50-50. I think they're both equally as important. You have to be great storytellers, and you have to have that creative side as well, but you got to use the data. And I don't think you can do one without the other. You need to be good at both now.
Yes. But again, you can sit there and plan the ideas, and it's going to go like that, and suddenly the data will not show it, and suddenly or it goes the opposite way. Suddenly data is like improving. It was better than you thought with the story. It's kind of creative versus market forces that we constantly face as CMOs.
Absolutely. And it's sometimes it is a gut judgment. Oh, I think we really should be doing more in this particular area, but you need to do more, but you don't necessarily know how much more sometimes. And so sometimes you do have to use your gut judgment on how much of an increase should I put over here on this particular area that we want to focus on. A good example of that, I think, is industries, right? So targeting and marketing to particular industries, especially during COVID, right? We all had to adapt and change because in industry, hospitality, for instance, right? The hospitality industry or the travel industry, that's like a quick, you need to just change and make those changes based on what's happening in the market or the conditions at the time. And the industry example, I think, is a prime one of a change.
Lynne, is there an example of a campaign where you had to pivot and you had to change the story or the numbers in order to reach the goal?
Let me think for a minute about a campaign that would go along with that. Yes. So we, for instance, had a campaign that I did adjust, and it was one of our campaigns for the customer data platform. Okay, that's a product that we offer. It's the Acquia customer data platform, or it's the CDP product, as I call it. So we had a campaign that we were running, which the data showed us. We were very, very pumped about it. We were very psyched about it. We put it out in market, and we didn't have great response initially. And the data told us, well, there's more than a million. There's tons of companies that are looking for a customer data platform at the moment. And what we found is that we were being too generic. And so we were able to kind of use the data to show this is not working enough for us. I'm not getting enough ROI on this particular campaign as I put it out through all of my channels, through social, through the site, through digital campaigns, through LinkedIn, through search, and so forth. I didn't get enough response on that. And what we discovered was we were just being too generic, and I needed to turn the dial on to getting more specific. So instead of, we're the best CDP, and it talked about customer data platform, it talked about specific problems. We then adjusted it to talk about specific challenges that the retail industry was facing. So we made it much more industry specific. So the more specific we could get, the more segmented we could get also. Then we said, okay, let's adjust first. It's the best customer data platform if you're in a retail environment, and we used retail terminology and we used retail examples, and we called them like, what are those customers looking for? What is it that they want to get if they're in the retail market? And so we had much, much tremendous better performance. I had to spend a little bit of time going through it, best for retail, best for financial services, that kind of thing. But it's an example of how we made a change and we pivoted. But we knew that the data still supported. There were so many different companies that were looking for a customer data platform. So that's an example. Without getting too specific, I think it's a good example of that, though.
I think it's a great example because in the first campaign you were selling yourself and how good you were, and in the second campaign you were talking about solving someone's problems, and they could more easily identify with a problem than they could identify with who you are and what you do.
That's right. Exactly.
So that's been the pathway going forward in terms of your campaign oriented, the more segmented, less generic.
Yes. So one of the things that we do now as a team, whenever I even start initially, like whenever we're doing our whiteboard and we're starting our campaign strategy and we're starting like our demand gen efforts, we start with where do we want to be? And so I start with desired customer outcomes. And so I have a messaging guide for all of our products and campaigns and briefs, but it has to have what are the desired outcomes, desired customer outcomes, because that is what I want everything tying to. I want to have my website talking about that. I want to have all the campaigns talking about it. I want my field reps talking about that. I want to communicate that to my partners and base everything around desired customer outcomes. And that's something that we're doing now across the board in all of our marketing.
Let's talk about the relationship between the CMO and the CEO. I'm very interested in that because it's a sense of friction because one depends on the other and you can't not really go along. So what's your advice you said earlier that you need to educate your CEO. How do you go about that? Because the CEO is usually someone who hires you and suddenly you have to come in and teach them something. How do you change that dynamic in that relationship?
Well, I've done it in a couple of ways through multiple jobs. I think one is tying yourself to those business objectives, right? The more you can tie marketing to what the business objectives are, the better. And then I have kind of a repeating performance going on. So I will, walk the CEO through, in a one-on-one. I walk through what our plans are. How am I measuring people? What are my targets? And how am I doing against those targets? So the more I can share from a data perspective, how we're doing against our goals, the better. And I come with very specific, as a CEO is always oriented around this, like, what are you trying to accomplish? What's your goal? How are you measuring? And what's the end result? How are you doing against it? So I show all that we're doing. I show all the things that we're not doing. I like to show that here's where we're cutting, because then it teaches the CEO, shows the CEO there are things that we're doing and not doing around what's working. A lot of times CMOs will say, I'm only going to present and show my great data, right? Like the great things that are going on. But I also like to show what's not working because it'll influence and help us. And the more the CEO realizes that and understands that, I think the better. And my other is just typically, it depends on the CEO, but typically the CEO is not interested in hearing about branding. So I don't really update that much around branding initiatives. I just try to show results over time. And so, and that's kind of one thing. I don't have long branding discussions, honestly. I don't typically do that with the CEO.
I like you talk about failing, because it's funny, because many marketing people are afraid to show. They want to show that successful campaign, but they don't want to talk about what failed. But by showing a failed campaign, you also admitting that you are not being sentimental. You are showing a weakness. You're showing that this didn't work. We tried this, it didn't work. Now we're going to focus on this thing over here. Is that opening up? But some people are afraid to show failure.
That in no way is a weakness. That's not a weakness at all. That is I'm looking at the data. I'm making a great business decision based on this data, and the data is not proving out to what we wanted and what we needed for the business. So we're moving away from it. I don't see that as a weakness at all. I really see it as a strength in terms of being able to make the right decisions and use the data to make the decisions. So not everything's going to work, and no one knows that more than a CEO usually. The CEO will know not everything works, right? They're not usually that rosy-colored glasses, I think. So I think, again, I don't see that as a weakness at all.
Awesome. That's good to hear. It's just because some CMOs out there are afraid, because you're such a vulnerable position and you're constantly being judged. And so, as you said, you want to tell the rosy story. This is really working, but many CMOs don't want to talk about what's not working. But I like that you're saying it's not a weakness, it's a strength. I like that. I think it's important too.
I will tell you that I always highlight many, many more positives than the things that are not working.
So the positive time, it's positive, negative, positive, right? You got to wrap it in there.
Exactly.
Got it.
Exactly.
It's important. It just is. All right. So speaking of CMOs out there, what other advice would you give to them?
Well, we talked about educating the CEO on marketing. I think looking at the data we talked about. I think that's critical and important. And I always recommend. I have a lot of CMO networks.
Yep.
Where I'm constantly now, especially in the virtual world, I'm talking with them, I'm communicating with them, I'm listening through other CMO huddle groups, CMO circles and coffees, and there's a lot of them. But I learn a lot from my peers. Yes. I learn a lot from sharing stories and hearing from other stories and hearing what people are going through. Everything from, what's the hardest marketing position to hire for right now? How do you keep people in seats? Yeah. How do you motivate them? What are the things that we're doing in a virtual world? When are we going back to events in person? And how are we doing that? And who's doing that? To, what's your demand gen strategy? And what % of your budget are you spending on this versus that? And so really tap a network of people, even outside of your industry, because I find that extremely, extremely valuable.
That's why we're doing this podcast. We want to share as much information as possible. So that's why it's great to have you on, so we can talk about these things and hopefully inspire other CMOs out there. What keeps you up at night? At
the moment, I would say retaining my talent and, really making sure that I'm providing enough career opportunities and making sure that, especially the ones that are a little earlier on in their careers, to make sure that they know they have a great marketing path here. And so I'd say that's probably the biggest one for me right now is retaining people, hiring people, retaining people, and making sure that I've got the right career plans. I mean, Acquia is a great company to work for, so I have the advantage there that we're known as a great, company to work for within our area here where we're headquartered. But it still keeps me up. It's still, it's still hard to hire right now.
It is hard to hire and it's hard to retain. And so being competitive, obviously it's great to have working for a great company, but are you feeling that you have to pay more to retain people, or what are the challenges around retaining people?
Sometimes it's not, sometimes yes, depends on the position, right? Sometimes yes, you have to pay more. But a lot of times it's, what else am I offering to them? And they can look around and see other examples. How long do people stay in their roles before they get promoted? Or is the company, and frankly, is the leadership and marketing management team, are we open to allow people to take other classes and learn other skills? And do we support that? And what are we doing to help the planet, right? Are we ESG oriented? Are we, it matters to people, right? Are we open, honest, and direct in our communications? Those kinds of things. Like I think a lot about culture, actually, and that has a big impact. So, rarely it's just the money. It's kind of, especially now, I find that in the folks that are younger in their career, it's more all the other things that are surrounding it,
You mentioned earlier about the field representative going out there. When you have a campaign, they also need to know. So the dynamic between the marketing team and the sales team or the field team, can you talk about the dynamics there and how the influence and how you support one and the other?
Yeah, for sure. I think the relationship between marketing and sales is really critical, right? Everything from kind of, my relationship between CMO and CRO, extremely critical, because that really, comes down in the organization. So we have a really tight ongoing relationship between marketing and sales at all levels at Acquia, but it's really critical because you can't have the marketing team focused on one thing and then the sales team is out there saying something else and focusing on something else. And how often does that happen, right? Like, I had it happen 100 times in my career, but those are typically the companies I leave because the company can't get their act together to combine, and have marketing and sales on the same page. But that's really critical. And, we do that in a variety of ways. The CRO and myself, we share the same goals for leads, for targets, for pipeline. On a weekly basis, we have our leadership team come together and there's report outs that happen. And so we sit there, the two of us, and we run that meeting and we, challenge people. We look at the data, we ask the questions on it, and we're on the same page and we are in sync. Now, we may not share the same opinions all the time, okay? But we have a nice process that we work through to try to make decisions, again, data-based decisions, right? Around what are we going to do and not do. And I'll never provide enough leads. I'll never have enough campaigns, right, for sales. But when I'm meeting the numbers, as long as we're meeting those numbers and we're accomplishing those goals and objectives that we have that we share together, that's the bottom line. We do a lot around enablement. So we do a lot of sales enablement. From the entry-level sales folks, we call them BDRs or they're ISRs, but business development reps or inside sales reps. We do a lot of enablement closely with those teams and then all of the field teams. So we do, especially when in the virtual world, we've done a ton of enablement to make sure that they're educated on the campaigns, they're educated on the products, and that we're all, saying the same message, if you will, and, and increasing our storytelling skills across the board.
Yes. And I'm glad to hear that because it's often a source of conflict between the sales department. The sales department blames the marketing department, and the marketing department blames the sales department. Well, we have the whole agenda, so you're really going to be on the same journey there. So, from an organizational point of view, you mentioned the CROs. I presume that's the Chief Revenue Officer. So, are you on par in terms of management, and you have to figure it out together, or is one above the other in terms of the structure of the company?
At Acquia, we both report to the CEO.
Okay, all right.
So we're peers.
All right. Okay. And you make it work. You have to make it work.
Yeah. And we do figure it out together. So rarely do we go to our CEO to try to, work something out or, we may go to escalate something for, but it's rare that we even have to do that because typically we're on the same page or we figure out a way to come to an agreement.
Yes. Okay. That's good to hear.
And then sometimes we just blame the product team because that's much easier.
It's always a team to blame. Okay. What is the 5-year vision? You mentioned earlier that you have some campaigns you want to do 3 years down the line, but what's the 5-year vision for Acquia?
Well, the 5-year vision, let's see. I think 5-year vision is really tied with, and Dries, our founder, talks a lot about this, but I think it's tied to, putting a digital experience in the hands of so many more customers to be able to do that. So I think it's really digitally enabling so many more people around the world. And so that's our bottom line, getting a digital experience and platform in front of folks and having them be able to do that and support their customers, whatever business that they're in, down the line. So we want to be much more visible in that area. And I think just expanding what we have to be accessible to many more people.
Sounds great. And it's absolutely a pleasure having you on here. Thank you so much for joining the podcast.
Thank you, Thomas. I really appreciate it. And it was really fun. So thank you for including me.
Thank you so much, Lynne. Thank you. At the end of every episode, I bring in Zane. Zane is a producer who's sitting in the background to make sure we sound good and look good. And the reason why I bring Zane in is to get his perspective on today's episode. So Zane, what do you think?
I think it was really interesting talking to Lynne, specifically how she manages the internal brand of Acquia.
Yeah.
So I don't think she ever referred to it as this, but the way that she spoke about talking to the CEO and making sure that everyone's on the same page all the way down to the different marketing teams and the sales teams. And I think that using the data to back up the story, I think, is where she really kind of hit the nail on the head in this episode.
Yeah.
Taking the story for granted or changing the story when the data is showing that the story that you're using isn't working. I think this is one interview where we kind of found someone who really understood the relationship between the importance of data in relation to the story that they were telling. And I think that's probably to do with the openness of Acquia as a company, because they're dealing with open source technology.
Yes.
So they have to be very open and they have to know what their message is. So
I like the whole dynamic between the talking about how you educate the CEO. I it's a tough one, because as a CMO, you're often hired by the CEO, right?
Yeah.
And the CEO stays, but you go because the results were not there. And then, so you already come in from I wouldn't say a weaker position, but you come in from a different position because you're reporting to this person, and suddenly you have to turn around. But I think it takes guts to go in and say, hey, I need to tell you what's going on and educate, but also talk about the failures. She didn't call it weaknesses. I really like that she was very strong about that. He said, no, it's not weaknesses. This is strength. I'm telling you, this is not working and this is working.
Well, that's the thing. A failure is just an opportunity to learn.
Exactly.
And I think, a good CEO understands that not everything's going to work.
Exactly.
But every time it doesn't work out, you learn what isn't working.
Exactly.
And so you can do something different in the future.
Exactly. So I like that. That was really good. And I also like the approach that the whole dynamic between the sales team and the marketing teams, because it's a really source of friction in many companies, because they keep blaming each other. So having that one and talking to someone on the same level to make sure you're on the same boat, so you have the same message that goes out. Yeah, because you have different ideologies and different philosophies, right?
Absolutely, and I think that is one of the situation I'm talking about, where they use data to back up the internal brand. Is like they use the data to make sure that they are communicating efficiently between the different departments, going like, what is our goal? What is the data that backs up the plan to get to that goal? And then get there in that way. So you're talking to people who may not understand the brand story or the branding of a company, but they do understand when we approached it in this way, which might involve branding and story, this technique worked. So this is how we're going to approach this problem. So you're talking to people who may not understand branding and storytelling in a way that they understand, which is through data.
And Lynne was very passionate. I just like that people are so passionate. They own it. She's so proud of what she does, and she just tell that she's good at what she does because she's proud of it. So
absolutely,
So
it was a great episode.
Good as her. Thanks, Lynne, for being on, and thanks, Zane.
You're welcome.
Thank you.